Hey, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unfeigned, the podcast. I'm Jay. I'll be your host. And on this episode, I want to talk about two things. First, I want to piggyback on the previous episode. My last episode, I talked about how you can guarantee that you'll never grow apart. And I want to clarify a few things because a lot of what I've talked about on that episode had to do with relationships. Uh, And a lot had to do with a marital relationship, but it really could be any relationship. It could be a friendship. It could be a coworker. It could be um, you're working on a project with someone, and it really could be any relationship that you could apply that to. Now, yes, it was specific to like a boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, marital, husband, wife kind of relationship. But again, you can apply the principles to any relationship. But I do want to clarify a few things. A lot of what I talked about referred to both people wanting to heal the relationship. And in that environment, everything I spoke about could apply. I believe any relationship can be healed, but it has to be both people. A lot of times you have one person, right? It's so common that where you have one person that wants to work on the relationship, where the other person is sort of aloof or checked out or whatever. And much of what I spoke about on a previous episode had to do with both people wanting to make the relationship work. And so everything that I spoke about, the quote unquote tools that I was offering, the advice that I was offering, whatever it was, applied to both people, what both people would need to do in order to guarantee that they would never grow apart. So I wanted to clarify that. The other thing I wanted to clarify is I didn't want to give the impression that if you're in a relationship that just isn't working out, if you're in a broken relationship, and it could be both of you don't want the relation don't make want to make the relationship work. It could be just one of you that does want to and the other one doesn't. If you're in that kind of relationship, I never intended to imply that y'all should try to heal the relationship. I believe every relationship could be. I don't necessarily believe that every relationship should be. What I mean by that is in the case of one person really wanting to go all in and the other person not so much, that's not a recipe for a healed relationship, especially if both people are not willing to do whatever it takes to heal the relationship. Excuse me. Those are definitely not environments for a healed relationship or for a relationship to go through healing. So I wasn't intending to say, it wasn't my intention to mean that every relationship should be healed. However, if both people say, you know what, I want to make this relationship work, well, then yeah, of course, sure. Then absolutely everything I mentioned in the previous episode would apply. So I did want to say that. Um, I will suggest, honestly, that if you felt like you've done everything you can and that you want to make this relationship work and you're wanting yourself to heal individually, you're wanting to heal together, you're wanting to heal the relationship, and you're doing everything possible, excuse me, and your partner just isn't having it, then it's not necessarily a bad thing to walk away, right? And I know certain relationships are complicated and whatever, but maybe it is a separation for a time, right? Maybe some decisions have to be made and some conversations have to be had to decide if the relationship is, in y'all's opinion, in y'all's desire, worth saving. The other thing I'd like to talk about on this episode is this idea of healing. If you've been listening to my podcast from the beginning, then you know that this podcast is about the last 9 years, right? It's this 9 year journey that I've been on. And yes, I make references from time to time, and I probably will continue to do so, of my life prior to those 9 years, right? And obviously, my whole life is my whole story, but this podcast speaks specifically to my 9 year healing journey. And so I mention healing a lot. I mention being healed and the word healing, and I offer my opinions on how to be healed. And I talk about that subject a lot. And as I thought about it, it could be confusing, right? What that means. And I know it's different for every person, and every person has a story. Everyone has a story. It's unique to all of us. But I do want to talk a little bit about on this episode about healing. And this is again from my perspective, this is from my story, my experiences. These are my opinions. And again, I would love to connect with y'all. If y'all want to connect, just reach out, email unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send me a message on any of the social media platforms. It's Instagram, anywhere where I post like a little teaser slide, those slides you may have seen. I post them on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So send me a message there or email me. So as I started to think about this idea of healing, and I continue to say, and I do, and I believe this, and it's true, that I am a healed version of myself. I'm walking in my healed version, right? And sometimes I'll say my rewritten story or my unmasked story. This is all my healed version. And I'll make references to things like in my healed version, as my healed self, my true authentic self, I would do, dot, dot, dot. And so I started to think about that and what that looks like, what that means. And it can be confusing. Here's what I want to touch on specifically in this episode. What I think the most confusing thing about healing, quote unquote healing, right, is this idea of what it looks like when you're healed. Now, none of us will step into our complete healing until, we're on the other side, right? Until we're in heaven. But our life is this lifelong journey of healing. And it's a process, and it's an adventure. And all of us are on unique journeys that are specific to us. And so we're constantly healing, and we're constantly growing, and we're constantly learning and changing and maturing. And so the confusing thing is, well, I say I'm healed. I'm my healed version. So does that mean I don't struggle anymore? Will that mean I won't have glimpses of my old self anymore? Will I not lose my temper anymore? Will I not be angry anymore? Will I not have lustful thoughts anymore? Will I not want to check out anymore and shut down anymore? Will I not argue anymore? Will I not be combative anymore? Will I not be jealous anymore? Will I not really want to do whatever that thing I was addicted to anymore? And unfortunately, it's not like that. All too often, I think people, when they think about being healed, they think that those things are no more. And we're in this quote unquote perfect state, right? That we're just this perfect man now or this perfect woman now because we're healed. And it's unfortunate because the struggle then becomes when something pops up, right? When something from our former self or our former life or how we used to be, when that rears its ugly head again, all of a sudden we let doubt creep in. And again, we listen to our inner critic, right? Because we're not, quote unquote, supposed to be like that anymore. And it's unfortunate too, because we have people in our lives that, for whatever reason, whether it be that they don't want to accept your healing, or they don't understand it. There's people in our lives that will feed your inner critic, and they'll get on the bandwagon and they'll say, I thought you were healed. Oh, you said you changed. You didn't change. You're just like you always were. You'll never change. You're the same as you always were. And they say things like this. And when we have this perspective of, well, I'm healed, so I'm supposed to be quote unquote perfect, even though we all understand that's not the case, but somewhere deep inside, we do, if we have this perspective of, I am not supposed to be anything of what I was before, which we're going to get into. But if we have this perspective and something pops up and we slip up, it's very easy to believe our inner critic that is telling us, oh, you haven't changed. You say you changed, but you haven't changed. And it's very easy to believe the people in our lives that are also spewing that hate towards you. And their comments that fuel your inner critic. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's people that can be close to us, people that we thought cared about us, people that we thought we used to care about, people we may even still care about, and that we think still care about us. And they're the ones. And again, they have their own story and their own healing journey, things that they have to heal from. But it's very easy to believe this inner critic. And I want to talk about this a little bit, because being healed does not mean being perfect. Being healed does not mean there are no remnants of what you used to be like. Being healed doesn't mean that all that stuff goes away. Being healed doesn't mean that all of a sudden now that stuff never existed. And by that stuff, the word stuff, you can fill in the blank, whatever that means to you or for you. It doesn't mean that it never existed. For instance, on a previous episode, I talked about my addiction to pornography, right? I am healed from it. And I'm going to be very vulnerable. I'm going to be very vulnerable and transparent on this episode, because I think it's important. I always say this. I do this podcast. I don't know what I expected from it. It still blows my mind that I connect with people that have listened and they say something has helped them, or they've listened to it and maybe they say something back to me that I've said. And it blows my mind, because I don't view myself as someone who has all the answers, who has arrived, or who's, better than anybody. I don't view myself like that at all. I just want to tell my story, and I hope and pray that it helps somebody. But it's so fascinating to me that it actually does and is. And I love that. It's so exciting. But never do I ever want to get to the place where I don't think I can learn and grow, where I don't think I can fall. That's when it becomes dangerous. And so I want to be very vulnerable and transparent. And on previous episodes, I've mentioned my addiction to pornography. I've also mentioned how I'm healed from that. And that may seem like I looked at pornography, but now I don't. That's what it might seem like just by saying I'm healed from that. And yeah, that is true. That is the case. Addiction to pornography is very involved. It's not as simple as you look at pornography and now you don't. But that is true. I used to look at pornography. Now I don't look at pornography anymore. But for me to think that now that I'm healed, that all of that temptation, all of that desire, all of that addiction, and everything that goes along with it doesn't exist, that would be really ignorant of me. That would be immature. Here's the thing. When I say I'm healed from pornography, it doesn't mean I used to look at it, now I don't. It doesn't mean I used to want to do it, now I don't. Although that is part of it. But what being healed from pornography means for me is I don't give in. I don't give in. I don't surrender to that. I don't give up, right? I don't give up fighting the temptation and say, ah, what the heck? I don't entertain doing that. So being healed from it involves still resisting, still fighting, still running the other way. But being healed from it means I know that I'm no longer a slave to that. I'm free from that. And I can choose to walk away. I believe that. I could choose before. I didn't believe it. I was a slave to it. And so I constantly gave in. Being healed from it means I know I'm not a slave to it anymore. I know I'm free and I can walk away. And I choose to. I choose to walk away. But here's what this means is the temptation's still there. The temptation to slip up, quote unquote, to go back is still there. But in my healed version of myself, I don't get close to the line. I don't entertain it. I make a choice right away because I recognize it right away. And I make this choice right away to resist and to walk away and to run away, honestly. And I'm going to be very, very vulnerable and transparent right now because this morning was tough. Since being healed from this addiction to pornography, it has gotten extremely easier, I should say. It has gotten easier. Um, maybe not easier is not the right. The temptation has had less of a pull. I should say that since being healed from this addiction to pornography, the temptation hasn't been as great. Right? It's been easier to just resist and walk away. However, there are times, there are days, there are moments when I can feel that temptation coming back up. And we're going to talk about this. I think I'm going to get into this on the next episode. Um, I think we might get into coping mechanisms. And that's important to understand because pornography was a coping mechanism for me. And we'll talk about it maybe on the next episode. But there are moments where I can feel the temptation coming up. And I can feel this desire like welling up inside me where I'm being drawn to pornography. And here's what being healed looks like because before I would do it because it was a way to cope. And you see, I'll get into it. But in my healed version, I recognize what's happening and I've replaced my coping mechanisms. Right? A lot of my coping mechanisms now are choose, commit, confront. What I put my attention to, I'll become attracted to. What I become attracted to, I'll pursue. Be curious, not judgmental. Those three things have become my coping mechanisms. I have some other reasons. I have some other quote unquote whys that give me strength, that reinforce my motivation, that empower my coping mechanisms. And maybe someday we'll get into those on some of these episodes. But today was extremely difficult. It was one of those occasions where I felt that. And I had to go back. I had to remind myself. I had to choose. And then I had to commit. I had to choose. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. I'm going to walk away. And then I had to commit to it. I had to stick to that commitment. And I had to confront that. I had to confront that temptation. And for me, another big part of it is my faith. And so when those moments come up, I immediately go to God. I immediately pray. And I remind God that He's commanded us, He's told us to take every thought captive unto the obedience of Christ. He's also told us that if we resist the devil, he'll flee from us. And so I repeat those things back to him. I ask him to take this thought from me. I ask him to take the temptation from me. I ask him to bless me, to give me strength to resist. And I get vulnerable and transparent with him about what I'm feeling and what I'm asking him to help me with and what I want to do. And I remind myself, and as I'm praying to him, I'm reminding myself of my commitment to being free from that addiction. And so for me, those things work. Those things are good. They're a part of my process. But that's what being healed looks like for me. It doesn't look like those things don't exist. My addiction to pornography is over. I am not a slave. I no longer live in that addiction. I'm healed from it. That means I'm free from it. But that also means that at times I'm still going to be tempted because I'm still human and still sinful, and life is still life sometimes. And for me, a pornography addiction was a stronghold coping mechanism in my life. And so when the things in life come up, because they're going to, when those things come up in my life where I used to have an unhealthy coping mechanism, which right now we're talking about my addiction to pornography. Now, when they come up, I don't. I have healthy coping mechanisms. I have healed coping mechanisms because I've healed from these things. I'm my healed version of myself. And those my three life mottos or three life mantras or three life whatevers you want to call them are very, very helpful to me in many areas of my life, but this one specifically. And we're talking specifically about pornography, but there are other things in life where people use as coping mechanisms. There are other things in life other traumas in life where people have been healed from or are trying to heal from. And so do I. You know, it wasn't like the only thing wrong with me was my addiction to pornography. And now I'm awesome because I healed from it. But in any area of my life, these three life mantras, this be curious, not judgmental, choose, commit, confront, whatever I put my attention to, I'll become attracted to, whatever I become attracted to, I'll pursue. Those things are what I pull strength from. Those are things I go back to. But I want to encourage y'all that if you are on a healing journey, if you have trauma in your life, if you have addictions in your life, if you have relationship issues that you're going through, if you have life issues that you're going through, whatever it is that you're seeking healing from, or whatever situation you might want to be healed, for example, a relationship, a marriage, a parent-child relation, whatever it is that you're seeking healing in or for or from, I want to encourage you because, excuse me, as you are on this healing journey, there will be times where the things you're trying to be healed from, the things that you're trying to heal, your healing journey, those things will pop up. At times, you'll come face to face with the very things that you are trying to heal from, or that you thought you were healed from, or that you're trying to heal specifically. These quote unquote old, these quote unquote toxic behaviors, right? The way we used to be, the things we used to do, how it used to be. These things at times you will have to come face to face as you are on your healing journey. And I want to encourage you that doesn't mean you're not healed or you're not healing. That is not an indication of your healing or of your brokenness. How you handle it, how you respond to it, how you behave in it, how you act when those things pop up, that's an indication of brokenness or healing. And so I just want to encourage you that if you are healing from things and you have healed and you consider yourself to be a healed version of yourself when it comes to whatever it is, fill in the blank. I want to encourage you that these things will still pop up. You'll still have to come face to face with these things. And that doesn't mean you're not healed. Regardless of what your inner critic is trying to tell you, and regardless of what even people in your lives that you might be close to are telling you, I want to encourage you that that's normal. It's normal because we're human. It's normal because we're sinful. It's normal because whether you believe it or not, like it or not, whatever or not, we have an enemy. The Bible tells us that Satan seeks who he can destroy and devour. He roams the earth looking for this. And so we have a real enemy that tries to break us. And so we will be reminded of these things, reminded of who we used to be, of how we used to be. And I want to encourage you to recognize those things, to not believe your inner critic that tells you you're not healed. If you were healed, you wouldn't blah, blah, blah. To not believe the people in your life that are telling you, oh, you haven't changed. You say you changed, but you haven't. You yourself, you know, if you've changed, if you've healed, then I want to encourage you to not let that knock you off track. Right? And if you have found healthy coping mechanisms, healthy ways to deal with these kinds of things, that's awesome. Continue to do that, right? Continue to fight. This is my encouragement. Continue to fight, continue to resist, continue in those healthy habits, those healthy behaviors, those healthy coping mechanisms. Remind yourself you're free from whatever it was. And I also want to encourage you that if anything you hear from my story helps, like I said, I'm telling you my story and these are my experiences and these things help me, right? If any of these things help you, man, that's awesome. And if you want to talk more about it, I would love to, right? Because we can get into a whole lot of details and the practicalities of how this works for me and what I do and all that kind of stuff. And I would love to, especially if you have experienced similar things that I have, and that as you're listening to my podcast and you're listening and hearing things that I've experienced. So y'all be encouraged, right? Keep fighting. Your inner critic will always try to speak to you. And being healed doesn't mean that inner critic now gets shut up. Being healed doesn't mean that inner critic now doesn't speak. It just means you don't have to listen. It just means you know how to have a conversation with it. It just means that you don't have to believe the lies that it might be telling you. So I know this episode's probably been a quick one, and that's fine. And I want to leave this episode with this. If you are if you're on this journey, whether you're at the beginning where you're recognizing things and you're wanting to be different, you're wanting to change, or you're wanting something to be different, or you're in the middle, or you come out the other side of something, I want to encourage y'all to connect with me, right? I want to encourage y'all to connect with other like-minded people that have healed from something, where you can learn from each other. The worst thing that any of us can do is not talk about it, right? I said this before, being vulnerable and being transparent is the key to healing. So if you, hopefully you have people in your life where you can open up to, um, and I would love to connect. I would love to hear your story. I would love to grow together, um, and get into some of the more of the details, that you might have questions about. But I encourage you, to to be vulnerable, be transparent. Obviously, only you know who those people should be in your life. But on the next episode, I want to get into, a bit of this coping mechanism idea and share a little bit about, um, what that meant for me, specifically around some of the ways I handled certain things and how that affected my life and my relationships. And um, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about that, and I'm going to leave you with this. Um, if you're in a relationship and you're wanting to make the relationship work, it has to start with vulnerability and transparency. And those conversations can become hard. They can be very difficult. Now, let me say this: if you've tried all you can try, and you're the only one, then it might be time to consider whether or not that relationship's going to work. And I'm not advocating for divorce. Trust me, and believe me when I say that. I think if both people want to save a relationship, then they should do everything they can to make it work, right? But having these conversations at the very least are extremely important, because if both of you want to make the relationship work, it has to start with vulnerability and transparency. And so those difficult conversations, which only you know what they are, those difficult conversations have to be had. And here's my encouragement to both of you. If you're the one that needs, well, if you're the one that is going to be vulnerable and transparent, then yes, understand it's going to be scary. It's unknown. You might even try to convince yourself not to do it. Take all of that. Take all of that with you, because this is a relationship, and true, complete vulnerability and transparency means your whole self, right? Bring all of that. And whatever it is that you need to be vulnerable and transparent about, it's not only like, hey, I've had this secret that I'm hiding from you, although that can be it. It can be a secret that you've been hiding. And I don't mean like, oh yeah, before we got married, like, I did it, unless you feel like that is important for your relationship. But you don't have to go to your husband or wife and be like, hey, when I was 10, I stole a gumball, or, you know what I mean? It can involve having something that you've kept from your partner, right? It doesn't only have to be that. It could be something that you're feeling. Whatever it is, be vulnerable and transparent. Now, if you're the one that is listening, if your partner is coming to you and wanting to be vulnerable and transparent, it is so extremely important that you do not judge, that you don't make assumptions, right? Be curious, not judgmental. So important that you provide a safe landing for your partner. Being vulnerable and transparent already feels unsafe, regardless of what it's about. Because if you haven't been vulnerable and transparent, there's probably a reason that you've convinced yourself is a good enough reason. More often than not, it's my partner isn't, it's not that safe. Like, I don't know how they'll react. I don't know how they'll think of me, or whatever it is. So if you're the one that your partner's coming to you and being vulnerable and transparent, be safe. Be a safe place. Oftentimes, all that is just listening, not judging. Right? There's that trend that trend that's out there. We listen and we don't judge. Right? But you have to be that place. You have to be able to be transparent and vulnerable when you're quote unquote giving, right? When you're the person doing the sharing or the talking or whatever. And you also have to be safe. You have to be a safe environment, a soft spot to land when you're the one receiving, when you're the one listening. But y'all, I promise you that if y'all are vulnerable and transparent with each other and you are trying your best, your absolute best, and you're doing whatever it will take for y'all to heal this relationship, then y'all, it will be healed. It can absolutely be healed from no matter what it is. And on last episode, I spoke about how never to grow apart. That's a very huge piece, is serving one another and always thinking how I can serve my partner. And you're elevating their needs above yours. And if you're doing this, you start to chip away the selfishness, which is a lot of the cause of problems in relationships. I know this may have seemed a lot like thinking out loud. I apologize for that, but I'm going to save some of what I wanted to talk about for some other episodes. But next episode, definitely tune in. I'm going to share a little bit about coping mechanisms and my opinion on them, how that's affected me, what my story or what coping mechanisms, the part that they played in my story. We will talk more about this issue of pornography and infidelity and that in that relationship context and how coping mechanisms played a part in that. But it doesn't necessarily have to only be about that. It could be, and we're going to get into a bunch of different things. So definitely tune in. Again, y'all, thank you so much for being a part of this, for listening to this podcast. Thank you to all of you who have connected with me. I want to connect with you more. And if you haven't connected with me, I would love to do so. So email me, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. Send me a message on the social media platforms and let's connect. Thank you again. I appreciate y'all so much. And I hope that you will continue on this journey with me. Share this podcast with anybody that you know or think would enjoy it or benefit from it or whatever. Until next time, see you then.